The ecumenical movement itself is a symposium, if I may characterize that. It is the continuing interrogation of the knowledge of God's people in the very localities where they live. And I think it would be sad if the ecumenical movement did not connect with the local communities, because, and I prospered the idea of the glocal. The ecumenical movement is simultaneously local and global. That the movement in my country, the Philippines, local, is global to people in Geneva. What's happening outside of Geneva is global. But what's happening outside of Geneva is also global, because what's happening in the National Council of Churches in the Philippines is local to them, but it is global to others. And so the support of the ecumenical movement, the moral support, the resourcing, what I call the resourcing of the oikomene. Every budget is a moral budget. It identifies your moral bearing. And the World Council of Churches and the wider ecumenical movement will be known by where it invests its moral and its financial resources. And it has to be for the betterment of God's people in their communities and the systems of governance that prosper life rather than peddle death. A revisiting of the legacy of the ecumenical movement, not only for its own right to exist, but in having given birth to other social movements. Let's not forget its contribution to gender justice, its contribution to food justice, its contribution to water justice, its contribution to the notion of peace building beyond simply the equanimity of relations of nation states, rather the sustainable development of communities and peoples. The debate within the ecumenical movement on communities of resistance, communities of empowerment, the provenance of the very term sustainable development, it antedates multilateral discussion on these issues. And so placing the ecumenical movement, placing the World Council of Churches, placing the member churches of the ecumenical movement in the larger configuration of social movements is important. That we should not cede the multilateral conversation to nation states. The very work of the ecumenical movement, the work of the WCC, the work of other ecumenical configurations, that conversation is is basically multilateral in itself. And therefore, where the venues where the critical intertwining of human life and their habitation, the planet Earth, the very notion of oikomene itself, the wide household of God, inclusive of humanity and their ecology, should not be abandoned by the World Council of Churches. The United Nations is one place, you like it or not, where life and the planet are on their agenda. And it is not an agenda that is always in conversation with life-dealing dynamics. The nation-state dynamic is always about the preservation of the inanimate nation-state, and therefore its constructs are nation-state constructs. The ecumenical movement needs to be present in the interstices of the conversation of nation-states to present not much of an alternative vision, but a vision that invites nation-states and challenges them from their original idea that from Westphalia, bloodbaths among people and their borders should stop. It has since abandoned that in the modern nation-state. The World Council of Churches and the ecumenical movement was part of that history. And the reconciliation process post-cultural and the unity that is required of God's people must reflect not only our repentance from our commission of acts contributory to the bloodbath, but then come to the forefront of governance systems like the UN and say, we are in the process of repentance. Repentance means that, our acts of commission are laid bare and under sanction of the forgiving love of God, and then exhibit how that looks like in every community. It would look like the provision of food, as I said, and justice in the communities, the provision of land and liberty, the provision of jobs and justice.